So welcome everyone to this DAB online Nyelvészeti Esték meeting, and we have our guest today is András Kornai, who is a very prominent figure in Hungarian linguistics. He doesn't need much introduction, but so I'm going to keep this short. So that he got 2 PhDs, one from ELTE in 1983 in mathematics, another one from Stanford 1991 as a linguist, was supervised by Paul Kiparsky. András Kornai is a full professor at the Budapest Institute of Technology right now, and also serves as a senior advisor at the Computer and Automation Research Center at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, and he has a broad range of interests, including natural language processing, speech recognition, and optical character recognition. But today, he is going to talk about lexicography and semantics for us from a computational linguistics point of view. So we are recording, as usual, we are recording this meeting. So if you don't want to be seen or heard, then be mindful of that. Turn off your camera and microphone. After the presentation, we are going to have a question and answers session. You might ask the question directly, it's via voice, or you can also use the chat, but we'll return to that after the talk. So Professor Kornai, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. So in the abstract, I promised lexicography for semanticists, but the first question is, why do we care about this? So generally, linguistics ever since Chomsky is focusing intensely on syntax, with even classical branches of linguistics such as phonology or morphology or semantics, sort of taking second row behind syntax. Almost everything is about syntax. And today I will actually provide some evidence for the view that the lexicon is more important, and specifically the semantic component of the lexicon is even more important. And I cannot actually give conclusive proof that the thesis known as radical lexicalism, that only the lexicon matters, nothing else matters, that this thesis is true, but I can point towards a specific weighting as to how much weight should the lexicon, and within the lexicon, how much weight should syntax and semantics take. So, and we will do this by information-theoretic means. So, just to set the stage, I will start with the central question. To produce and understand language, certain things need to be memorized. Okay, there is no doubt about this, that you have to memorize certain things, you learn them, and they constitute your language competence. And of course, there are two questions which are really central here. How much needs to be memorized, and what exactly needs to be memorized? And one extreme view is that, well, you can memorize all the sentences that you have heard before. And then that's actually quite a bit of memorization. And that's not how linguistics, aside from a small branch called exemplar-based approaches. Typically, this is not the approach that we take. We like to sort of minimize the amount of stuff that needs to be memorized. And the traditional view, it's not at all original with me, but I will be a staunch defender of this view, is that to learn a language, you need to learn the words. Okay, this is not such a, you know, everybody who learned as a language as an adult, of course, knows this perfectly well, that you have to learn words, and without the words, you are sort of stuck, and they are sort of, in early stages, you go to the dictionary all the time, and, you know, if you take formal language lessons, very often there will be a set of words after each lesson that you're supposed to memorize, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we collect the words and whatever ancillary information seems to be necessary in the dictionary, what the linguists call the lexicon. We don't call it the dictionary, we call it the lexicon. And our interest is not so much with the printed dictionaries as with the mental lexicon. And really the question is, how is this mental lexicon structured? And unlike the printed dictionary, we are pretty sure that it's not structured alphabetically. But a sort of plausible question, is it structured like a database? If the brain is like a computer, is it structured like a database with database records and database keys? We'll try to provide some answers to these questions. Okay. So some terminology. This is, again, nothing new here. I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page. Lexicon stores the linguistic information, what is known as word knowledge, and encyclopedia is what stores world knowledge. So, and are these two coextensive? No. There are several views here, and Cabrera distinguishes, if I can actually turn the page, several views. One of them is the strong dualist view. It is feasible to draw a clear-cut distinction between dictionary and encyclopedia. And basically, somewhat dismissively, he says that, well, nobody since Aristotle seriously held this view. And turns out that the view we are presenting here is pretty damn close to the Aristotelian view. So it's as conservative as you can get in this business. Okay, and then for some reason I cannot now use, I don't know why, cannot, oh yeah, no. The weak dualist position is that some distinction between word and world information can be made, but dictionary meaning cannot be completely defined prior to implementation in context. So again, anticipating matters somewhat. I disagree with this view. I'm more on the strong side than on the weak side here. There is the strong monist view. There is no dictionary encyclopedia distinction, either theoretically or functionally, i.e. at the operational level of the actual process of utterance interpretation, and I assume utterance production. And there is the weak monist view. There is no dictionary encyclopedia distinction, not even in the terms proposed by weak or strong dualistic theories. So actually, I think the weak monist position is stronger than the strong monist position, but I'm not going to go into the details of this because I actually will take a somewhat dualist position here. Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to look both at the practice of linguistics and lexicography, and the practice of AI and knowledge representation. So we'll try to do both of these things at the same time, or one after the other. Okay. And there's three major dictionary types that are recognized by people: the monolingual dictionary, the bilingual dictionary, and the frequency-based dictionary. And we will touch on all of these. Traditionally organized, each dictionary is traditionally organized into lexemes, sublexemes, and occasionally sub-sublexemes. Okay. So if you look at Magyar Nyelv nagyszótára, this actually has sub-sublexemes, but a lot of dictionaries sort of maintain 2 levels and only a few maintain 3 levels. So, and we will start by looking at the traditional dictionary entries here. We will assume a simple, what is somewhat jokingly called the telementation model of communication. Okay. I have an idea. I say something. The hearer hears this. The hearer understands this. And now hearer has the idea. Okay, so somehow we telementated the idea from my head into the hearer's head. This is the model that we will be working with. Again, it's open to all kinds of philosophical objections, but I will ask people to hold their philosophical objections until the end, and then I'm happy to return to this issue. Okay, so in medias res, here is, I have to, I think, shrink the page size. Okay, is it still legible at this size?
Depends on how much we are supposed to read.
You are supposed to read each and every letter on it. Now, we are not going to read it all, but if you look at an entry, you're supposed to be able to say spelling reform is a noun, and it's a movement to modify conventional spelling so as to lessen or remove the differences between the orthography and the pronunciation of words. Compare reformed spelling. Am I the only guy who could read this, or
No,
can
it
everybody
seems
read
to be
this?
okay. Seems to be okay.
All right. Push comes to shove, I can go push out to a slightly larger side, but not a whole lot. Okay.
I think it's fine.
This is. I turned off my phone, but it's too smart. I'm sorry. So now my computer rings. All right. So the entries I'd like you to take a look at are actually not the entries related to spelling. They are more these innocent entries down there here, like spelunker. Who knows what's a spelunker without dictionary? I was a spelunker at a younger age, so I know what this word means. A spelunker is one who makes a hobby of exploring and studying caves, barlangas. Okay, that's a spelunker. Okay, and we have spelunking, which is the hobby or practice of exploring caves. And we have speleological, speleologist, speleology, speleothem, and a few other words related to this idea. And now let's look at the structure of the lexemes. All the lexemes are like this. They have sort of standard components. They have some pronunciation, which in the database world we will think about the phonological database key. We have a part of speech, which is the syntax database key. We have a definition, which is the semantics database key. And we have a bunch of ancillary information, such as the etymology, the variance, style, topic, frequency, hyphenation, what have you. And the head word is usually derived via orthography. Some morphology may be involved in there. And this structure is very easily extended to bilingual and multilingual dictionaries. But the real question is, what do we do with technical vocabulary? So there are millions of words, okay, for chemical compounds, for animal species, for names of people, for names of places, organizations, okay? So people generally do not put these in the dictionary. And if you look at the Oxford English Dictionary, it actually spells out in some detail the policy, how normally these dictionaries work. They say that we don't have proper nouns or phrases unless their meaning has acquired some kind of culturally symbolic shade, okay, that goes beyond actually naming the person or the institution or the organization, in which case the OED does include it. Okay, so and here is now a frequency list. Okay, this is I've taken out roughly the same section from a very, very large frequency count over 1,000 billion words. Okay, this is known as the Google Tera word corpus. It's not just a gigaword corpus, because it's not just a billion word, it's 1,000 billion words. It's a significant corpus based on the Google search engine at a certain time, 15 years ago. Now I'm sure it's even bigger than that. And what I want to call attention to is not just the blue things that appear here related to spelunking and speleology, but also the amount of stuff that would not make it to any dictionary, because they are the results of some kind of tokenization technology. So you see with 951 entries, spell at quote. This is obviously some kind of misparsing of the HTML that was the basis that you received the pages in HTML in web crawling. So very often you have misspellings. So spelling is a misspelling, I'm sorry. And quite often you have foreign words because you could not keep the corpus entirely English. Okay, the sort of mixing in of other languages is very typical, and you really have to work against it. It's not easy to keep it correct that way. But the main point here is that the forms are not at all in the order than you would expect them. Turns out that speleothems is far more frequent than speleothem in the singular. So the plural is 2.5 times as frequent. You see things like same with spelunkers. Spelunkers in the plural is 1,345 times, and spelunker in the singular is just 2/3 of that. And we have words, of course, speleogenesis, right, which are there in this set, but they are not there in the dictionary. And spelunk, which is clearly a back formation from spelunking and spelunker, people who like to spelunk, right? This is a back formation. It's also not in the dictionary. So one thing that you find is that you will need a fair amount of productive and semi-productive morphology to handle the actual variety that occurs in texts. Okay, so the coverage, without doing the morphology, doing it something like morphology, you don't do too well because out of vocabulary, OOV, this is known as the OOV problem. This is a big problem. You cannot get good coverage of the dictionary without doing significant amounts of morphology. Okay, the common vocabulary, so the most frequent entries, are often used in second language instruction. And it is less trivial to define. I would want to say this, that you cannot just take a big frequency count and take the most frequent elements there and say that, okay, this is the common vocabulary. This needs quite a bit of more sophistication. Actually, better methods were initially pioneered by Thorndike, who was a professor of psychology at Stanford, and 100 years ago he started to build frequency lists for English with educational purposes. And he went, so first he built the first 10,000, then he went on to 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. And known as, I think, the teacher's word book or something like this. And the to this day biggest and bestest Hungarian frequency dictionary, Füredi and Kelemen, actually describe the methods of how you transcend this idea of taking just the most frequent ones and how you correct the frequency values to do something more useful. Okay, but our interest here will be more with the basic vocabulary. So basic vocabulary, the idea that there is like a primitive vocabulary list and everything else can be reduced to that. So you don't need all the fancy words. You can start with a simple set. This goes back to Ogden in 1944, and today is carried out in earnest by the so-called simple Wikipedia, which is written in an artificially simplified version of English, specifically for foreign language learners, very much with the idea of keeping the vocabulary size down. And we did a systematic study of this some years back. Okay. Now, for the basic, of course, everybody tries to build a basic list. Okay, if you go to this web page, this may even be clickable if we can upload the slides somewhere. Once you get the PDF, you can don't have to type in these horrendous things because the links are clickable. Okay, so there are. This one is a systematic sort of list of lists, not just a list of lists, but a linked database of all these lists. And it has over 450 sources. Okay, one of these 450 is the four-length system that me and my students have been building for the past 12, 15 years. So it's worth looking at this just to get an idea about the variety of things that people have tried. And I think the best known of these, besides the Ogden list, are probably the lists that are used in cross-linguistic studies. So there are famous lists for there, and some others are also very well known. Okay. So we tried to build one, and there's now a couple of books, semantics and vector semantics that discuss how our system is built, and I guess I'll say a bit more about that later. Okay, so speleology. Back to speleology. It is obviously the etymology. Look at this from speleum, cave, plus ology, the science of something. So this gives you speleology, the science of caves. Okay, it sounds perfectly reasonable. People understand this immediately, and they are very happy about now they know what is speleology. Okay, really the devil is in the plus and the equal sign. In what sign is this a plus? Okay, we don't say speleomology, we just say speleology. Okay, so there is some truncation going on. There is depending on your view of the matter, this is morphology or morphophonology. There is stuff happening when you do the plus. And also, in what kind of this is science of caves equal speleology? So there is a lot of semantics there. Okay, so while the immediate idea is clear to everybody, the actual process is a bit more complex. Okay, so and the fatal problem with this entire approach is that we actually, as linguists these days, we do not look at the etymology because the language learner doesn't have access to it. So the idea is that people learn the language without studying all these old tomes, and it's just not part of the primary linguistic data that the kid has access to. But of course, we will look at the frequencies for the very same reason, because the primary linguistic data naturally comes frequency weighted. The most frequent words will appear more frequently in the language learner's input. Okay, so and we will also look at other standard parts of the lexical entries, such as labels for domain. So we very often find in the dictionary labels like this is for law, or for medicine, or for biology. For style, this word is taboo, this is humorous, this is biblical. For geographic distribution, this idea that you do this stuff, actually Panini already did this. Okay, so we already find in Panini words marked by stuff that says in the speech of the Northerners. Okay, if you want to understand this in any detail, then you should read Kiparsky's great book, Panini as a Variationist, because there is also, you know, in the speech of the Vedas. Okay, so there's this historical, geographical, he does stuff, including things that this is dispreferred. You don't want to say this. This is okay, but it's frowned upon. Okay, so there's stylistic guidance in there already. And needless to say, syntax also has significant material, primarily in the form of part of speech, but then you can also think about the subcategorization frame. Typically for verbs, this is a chunk of information. What kind of cases are governed by a particular verb, this kind of stuff, okay? And then you have something of an arm wrestling whether this should be considered syntax or semantics. But since the same thing is denoted by different cases in different languages, and the working hypothesis of everybody is that the semantics should be pretty much universal. The conclusion is inevitable that this is sort of language specific, more syntactic than semantic, this part of information. Okay, and now let's look up one more time at speleology. What kind of science is this? So first of all, there is an empirical subject matter. Obviously, there are caves, and not only are there caves, we deeply care about them. Okay, caves matter. You find shelter in them. You can, human civilization is deeply intertwined with, living in caves and stuff. So we care. To this day, we care. But if you actually look at the caves, it turns out that their formation is a matter of geology. And there's interesting, animals and plants living in there. But that's really a matter of biology. And their population, nowadays, not a lot of people live in caves. It's more a matter of archaeology, okay? So what we don't have is a unified science of speleology. All we have are theories or principles from other more coherent theories that we try to apply or extend to caves. Okay, so speleology is a science with a very definite subject matter but not a very definite and unified method, okay, or line of thinking. And the claim here is that lexicography is not very different from this. Actually, semantics itself is not that different. Obviously, people talk to each other and can understand each other well enough to cooperate. So there is a subject matter. It's a sort of a well-defined, empirical, replicable subject matter here. People, when the communication breaks down, they go to war. So the stakes are high. This is, whether they understand each other or don't understand each other, it matters. And we do the same thing. We will throw everything at the problem: the logic, statistics, math, computer science, linguistics, semiotics, cognitive science, philosophy, and we see what sticks. Whatever works, works. And the rest we will basically drop on the back burner. So the approach taken here is irenic and syncretic. Okay, and it will also be bottom up rather than top down, in the sense that I will not follow the thinking of some great men, the Einstein of the field, or somebody who just tells everybody what is the right way to think about this, and that's the end of the story. Everybody goes and does the work based on the giant conception of the great man. But rather, I will sort of look at what people in the trenches, lexicographers, knowledge representation people, information workers, computer scientists, everybody is doing, and try to collect from these slowly, piece by piece, something that ends up being a usable theory. Okay. So the overall model, again, is open to all kinds of philosophical objections, but please hold these. There's three kinds of things in this model. There are concepts or ideas, okay? And there are expressions or forms, okay? And these two together, pairings of these two, are known as the linguistic sign, okay? And then there is the real world, which is the smallest circle of the three, but it's quite a big thing. And there is a fair amount of interest as to whether how the concepts, ideas relate to the real world, and how the forms relate to the real world. Okay, and telementation. Back to telementation. What is this? This is, like I said, somebody has some idea, says something, and the other person actually has a somewhat similar idea based on this. Okay, not necessarily exact same idea, but something very similar. Okay, and to illustrate this, I wanted to you know draw some schematics, but then I realized that I don't have to do this word anymore. So I just asked ChatGPT, gave it the prompt, please create a sequence of 3 images. The first one should show a woman thinking about a candle. The second should show the woman saying the word candle to the man by means of enclosing the text candle inside the text bubble coming from her mouth. The third image should show the man thinking about a different candle. Okay? So this is what ChatGPT produced, and I would like to go and claim that here telementation has taken place, actually, that I said something, I had an idea. I said something, and ChatGPT produced something that pretty much is expressive of this idea. Okay, and you can, and no doubt people will argue with me about this, but if I then just randomly generated a bunch of other figures based on the exact same prompt. There is in ChatGPT a button that says, okay, do something else for the same input. And a lot of them actually are very good. And some of them are awful. Okay, so there is all kinds of subtle problems. Here is like, here they share the idea cloud. Well, I don't think this is what we wanted. And they also talk symmetrically, but they are both talking. That's not what we want. And in this one, the woman actually has the candle, but not as an idea, but as a physical thing. So ChatGPT is getting an imperfect idea of my idea, but all of these are pretty close. Okay, and I think this is actually typical of the real situation in which no matter what I say, people will not understand me exactly. They will understand me only up to a point. Okay, so and their idea, like in the last picture, the guy thinks of this candle, but the woman thinks of this other candle. They are not at all the same candle. They are similar enough. Okay. It's similar enough for communication to be workable, but they are not identical. Okay, so I said that I will be ironic, and I'm sure many people thought that my approach will be ironic. No, my approach will be ironic, which means conducive to or operating toward peace, moderation, harmony, and conciliation, and away from contention and partisanship. Okay, that's the idea. This is, I'm trying to bring peace here. I'm not interested in fighting the fight of one or the other linguistic theory. There are many. Even within syntax, there are dozens and dozens, and I am not ready to enter that fight. I'm trying to look at things in a somewhat abstract manner, and again, my basic idea here is whatever works, and that's the part that I will gladly take if something works, and if it doesn't work so well, I'm not that happy to take it, even though there may be some theoretical considerations that tell you that, yeah, you should be really doing that. Okay, and syncretic, right? Syncretic is also, number one, it is, of course, characterized or brought about by syncretism. This is not very helpful, but you go to syncretism, and again, the etymology is hugely frustrated. There's syn, kretismos, a federation of Cretan sites, right? From Crete, to unite against a common enemy. Okay, so we have a task, and I want all these people, all these branches to work towards the same goal of understanding communication, how the telementation process, if you will, and also the language acquisition process, those are the goals. Okay, now you look at ironic from a different dictionary, which is actually the Collins English Dictionary, which is already organized as a database. This will make things a lot easier. It's already split up into fields. So the etymology field, there is an alternative spelling, there is a head, there is alternative spelling again, there is syllabification, pronunciation, part of speech, pronunciation, a part of speech. Where does it come from? Well, chiefly from theology, but not only. And here is finally a definition: tending to conciliate or promote peace. Okay, it's not so different from the definition above. Okay, this is how sort of a modern dictionary database looks like. Somewhat still close to the printed form, but more suitable for systematic search and comparison and this kind of things. So now we move on to information theory. By the way, how much time I have in total?
Well, we don't have a definite boundary, but like you can go on until 7.
Okay. Okay.
And
so
we can have some
my
discussion.
plan was for 90 minutes. We will get as far as we get. But if it's not if it's too much, I don't want to burden people. So then we will stop earlier. Okay. So a brief example is geographic labels in the Collins Dictionary. It's like in the US, in Canada, in the Caribbean. There are 118 of these. And the worst idea you can do is to devote one bit to H, which says it's a flag, right? Is it in the US? Yes, no. Is it in the Caribbean? Yes, no. Okay, so this would require 2.385 megabytes. So that's a lot of bytes, you'll see. A slightly better idea is to number the labels between 0 and 118 and encode each of these numbers in 7 bits. And now we are down to this many times 7 bits. From this many times, that's the number of words for which labels can apply, number of records. But now we don't need 118, we only need 7 bits. Okay, so now we're down to 145 kilobytes. Okay, a lot smaller, obviously. And now there is the emergence of the unmarked, that's in the original sense of Trubetskoy. So it's a bit more narrow than McCarthy and Prince would have it. We don't assign a label to the case when there is no label, we leave it unmarked. Okay, now we only need 153 times 7 bits. For the rest, we still need 7 bits. And this is now only, remember, we lost from megabyte, we came down to kilobyte. And here from kilobyte, we came down by this one trick that linguists love. We came down to 659 bytes. Okay, so can we do better? And now comes quite a bit of sophisticated math. I will touch upon this very briefly. You can bring this down from 659 bytes to 428 bytes. By doing the right kind of entropy coding, you are down to this puny amount, 400 bytes. You started out with over 2 megabytes, right? So this is a pretty impressive compression that we can reach by relatively simple methods. Okay. So very briefly about information. Information is measured in bits and bytes, can be computed by the Shannon formula, and it's the property of distributions, not of individual items. This is very important to keep in mind. And it costs the average number of 20 questions, like this, like bar kokba in Hungary, that 20 questions, you can pose a number of questions, always receiving a yes/no answer. And this counts, the information counts the average number of the best series of questions. How long is it going to be? It takes to identify a particular item, the average number, okay? So if something contains 21 bits of information, then you are lost on 20 questions. There nobody can get to the answer in 20 questions, because that only produced 20 bits of information in the best of possible cases. So entropy is a hard lower bound on how much space we need. Okay, And if one thing that is worth mentioning, it is not trivial, if the distribution is sufficiently uneven, then the average information content can stay finite even if there are infinitely many choices. I argue that this is actually the situation with human words, that we have infinitely many of them. Nevertheless, their information content is limited. Depending on language, somewhere between 12 and 16 bits or thereabouts. Okay, so, and there is a specific example of the coin toss language, which illustrates this rather clearly. People can do the computation using the Shannon formula to see that even the language is infinite, you can, on the average, get to every element by a finite number of questions. Why? Because the ones that take a lots of questions are rare. Okay, so let's look at the absolute label frequencies in the Collins Dictionary for this geographic thing. It's the biggest one is in Britain, then in the US, in India, in England, and going down to in 18th century something, in 19th century Ireland. Okay, so again, the geography and the history blurs together. And if you look at after this, it says in England when the sovereign is male. What? Okay, what is this? Turns out there is something called the King's Regulations, the code of conduct for members of the armed forces that deals with discipline, aspects of military law, etc. Usage. In Britain and the Commonwealth, when the sovereign is male. Now you can figure out the rest. The Queen's Regulations are the exact same things, except when the sovereign is female, the same object is called the Queen's Regulation, not the King's Regulation, okay? So we could rationalize the labels and you could do a bunch of stuff to simplify this, but we will not follow this. Why? Because there are only the total number of labels, not just geographic, now all kind of labels is down to 6,000 and they are unevenly distributed. And the total information content is less than 22 kilobytes. Okay, so less than 1 bit per entry is what we have there. And now we look at this section by section. And again, something that will help people who basically use computers day to day. File compression does not change the information content. If you can compress it, then it has at most that much information. So everybody uses zip or gzip or xz or some other compression and decompression tool. So running English text is generally compressed to about 1/3 of the original file size, and that doesn't change the information amount. It now fits in less bit, but fewer bits, but that is there's still an upper bound. If you have for smarter compression, you could compress it maybe further. So the Collins Dictionary is 27.9, 28 megabytes uncompressed. Compressed is down pretty well to 6.2 megabytes compressed. Okay. So this gives you an idea of the size of information that is contained in a dictionary. Okay. With low bitrate encoding, 1 second of speech is about 120 bytes. And you can say about 6 to 8 syllables per second. So a word is about 60 bytes. Okay. Compared to the written form, orthographic form, which takes about 1.70 bits per character. Okay. And it's generally less than 2 bytes. What you see is rare is the word that is longer than 14 characters. So, and if you use some kind of phonemic transcription rather than orthographic, that could even be better. Okay. And I should mention here that the image format, like a PDF file, is much worse. That's like 4 times the size of the ASCII format. Okay, so the phonology. The phonology is made easy by the fact that it's an advanced theory with well-defined representations. Actually, phoneme strings are good enough for the purposes here, and the statistical properties of phonemes and strings of phonemes are well understood. It's much easier, as it happens, it's much easier to look at orthography, to look at character entropy than phoneme entropy, because we don't have nearly as much phonemically transcribed speech as orthographically transcribed. Okay, we have mountains and mountains of text, and we have a trickle of phonemically transcribed material. But you can do this at home, take a corpus, compute the character entropy. So for lowercase English, we ignore the upper lower, you will get about 4.5 bits per character if you do it like this. But actually, if a word is written with 6 letters, you don't need 6 times 4.5 to describe it. Why? Because the character phoneme string is redundant, and knowing the phonotactics helps. You can know the phonotactic and be more clever about this. So you need fewer than 27 bits. Like I said, you need on order maybe 16. Okay, syntax and other small fry. Syntax is small fry. The bulk of syntactic information in the lexicon is provided by the part of speech. In Collins, this is 0.85%, less than 1% of the total, okay? So you can compare this to the pronunciation, phonology, which takes 5.3%, or the syllabification, be it, whether you consider it orthographic or phonological, doesn't matter, takes about 9%, okay? Etymology, which we'll continue to ignore, takes 8.5%, okay? So the dictionary, again, this is 10 times more than the entirety of syntax, okay? You can ignore it. We will ignore it. So the stylistic and other labels, 4.4%. The headword itself, the variants, and all other information is 13%. And where's the bulk? The bulk of the information is in the definitions. That's half of the information. Okay, so again, the rough proportions, they are also evident if you just take a visual inspection of any dictionary. How much of it is devoted to part of speech and other syntactic information, and how much is it devoted to the definitions? Okay, so here is a straw poll. What is the relative weight of syntax to semantics? I would like people to maybe for one moment either put it in the chat or just say it out loud. What do they think? Marcy is asking in the lexicon. No, in research effort is what I'm asking. So I'm measuring this by taking some journals from the field, obviously not a phonology journal because that will be containing just 100% phonology, but general linguistics journals or the totality of journals known to me, and try to estimate how much is the article count or the page count weighted towards syntax and semantics. What do people think? So Balin says syntax to semantics is 3-to-1. Okay, I think that's actually underestimating it. I think it's more like 5-to-1, but I'll take this estimate. So based on the information that must be stored, semantics should be 50 times the size of syntax, right? I just computed this. Information theory does not lie. This is like sort of a hard upper bounds on how much this must be. And this actually confirms what I'm saying, confirms the habit of traditional linguists, pre-20th century linguists, who used to write these grammars of languages, which was taken up by 90% or 95% by morphology, sometimes all was about the morphology, and putting the syntax in a small chapter. Okay, so proportions are similar in Panini and in the entire grammatical tradition up to sort of the generative revolution. So again, in running text word entropy is 12 to 16 bits, and syntax turns now to contribute only 2 bits or less. So so the claim is that syntax is somewhere between 0.8% and 12% of the whole story, and the estimate on a core vocabulary suggests 1.55%. Okay, now we move on to the lexical semantics. And again, I will cut out a fair amount of what I wanted to say because Peter said I should finish by 7, and I'm trying to do my darn best here. Okay, so in many topics, the technical vocabulary is key. you need to actually consider, you cannot read a medical paper without understanding, or a biology paper, chemistry paper, without understanding the technical vocabulary. And in many other things, such as journalism, proper names and name entities are key to the understanding of what to exist. The problem here is that there are hundreds of millions of entries in each of these categories: person, location, organization. And I'm going to skip briefly over two things that are well known for every practicing lexicographer. First of all, the fact that it's not just word, it's multi-word expressions. So what does this mean, Hutch for sale as is? What does this mean? I'd like people to offer some suggestions here. Okay, so people are bothered by two facts generally. They are bothered by the fact that they have no idea what's a hutch. Okay, this typically people don't know. They would go to a dictionary and look it up, or go to Google these days, look it up. They know for sale, of course. But they don't know as is. As is then again this idiom. Okay, so again you need to turn to the dictionary, and the good dictionary must contain not just hutch, but must contain also as is. Okay, so for our help, here are the main thing I'd like to point at actually. Maybe I will enlarge a little bit if I can manipulate this. Yes, as is, in its present condition, without any repairs, improvements, or alterations being made. The car was priced at $1,000 as is. Okay. You cannot complain. You get what you get. This is sort of an explicit disavowal of any warranty. As is perfectly common expression, actually. And the hutch, you see this beautiful picture in the dictionary. It's a specific kind of cupboard with this top part. That's hutch number 1 or hutch number 2. There are pictures from Google, and there is the other hutch, which is the rabbit hutch, which is this thing is basically a box with some kind of wiring on one side so that the rabbits can breathe. And you go, if you put down rabbit hutch in Google, you will get a sort of rich set of examples. Okay, general principles that we deal with are universality. The system, whatever system we use, it should work for the same for all languages. Reductivity, you can define the simple by the more complex or the equally complex. Compare spelt, any of several varieties of emmer. This was on the original page with the spell and the spelunking, right? And it's a very common thing in dictionaries. How many people here know what's emmer? I had no idea. Okay, I had to look it up also in the dictionary. So the help I was getting for the entry spelt was 0. And this was something that Leibniz, is ever a sharp guy, already noted. So he says, suppose I make you a gift of a large sum of money, saying you can collect it from Titius. Titius sends you to Caius, and Caius to Mavius. If you continue to be sent like this from one person to another, you will never receive anything. Okay, so this is actually quite a bit of a problem. Dictionary definitions rely on other words, and the four-line system seriously attacks this problem. No encyclopedic knowledge. I will leave this to the question paper, but where do we keep the line? Well, we follow Aristotle. We keep only essential properties in the definition. Okay, so accidental properties need not apply. They're not going to make it into the lexicon. They can be there in the encyclopedia. There's nothing wrong with them having there, but they are non-essential. Okay, so now the structure of the lexicon. So there are disjoint lexical entries. Basically, we have lexical entries for words and for morphemes, and these are called lexemes. And these overwhelmingly correspond to traditional dictionary entries. The differences is that they come from two ranges. First of all, we do not hesitate to give lexemes or dictionary entries for entries that are bound morphemes. Okay, some dictionary making practice, lexicography is split on this issue. Some dictionaries hate the suffixes and prefixes and all that stuff. Others actually provide them. So, and here we firmly come down on the side of providing. Yes, you need these. They are good. They very help with the coverage and the generative aspect. So yes, we're going to have them in there. And the other difference is that not necessarily in the lexicon, but somehow closely tied to lexical entries, we will have some conceptual stuff. I will give one specific example. But for 95% of the stuff, our notion of the traditional corresponds, of a lexeme corresponds to the traditional dictionary entry pretty well. Okay, so in dictionary databases, these used to be the records. But here we don't subdivide them into fields, as is the dictionary database does, or typeset dictionaries also do this, although they don't, I don't know, sometimes they call them fields. So rather, each entry is an associative network itself, a tiny network with spreading activation. This is an idea taken from, half-century-old knowledge representation. And the phonology will be done by autosegmental representations. This is not discussed today. I cannot go into this. This requires huge machinery. But basically, you can do the stuff by automata. And people who do like Kimmo style phonology and morphology, two-level phonology, morphology, know how to build these automata, and they even exist for Hungarian at this point. So it's a done deal that works, okay? And more interestingly for us, they can also be viewed as vectors, okay? And the vector semantics, of course, that's about the vectors, unsurprisingly. So the stylistic and other labels are handled in the vector space by so-called ultra-dense subspaces. So there's a couple of papers that I'm referring to here by Heinrich Schütze, who was actually the main inventor of the word vector stuff. And we have the system, that the overall system has the technology for etymology, because the diachronic phonological rules are just as easy by automata as the synchronic rules. But we don't have the data. We don't have, as sort of modern style, machine learners don't have the data, and the kids don't have the data. So we will continue to ignore etymology, okay? In addition to traditional word sense, we also have bound morphemes, and morphology, of course, one big difference from syntax is that it has non-compositional semantics, but we can deal with this. And the other thing I mentioned, that there will be a few things there that are sort of non-verbal, non-directly expressed, they are just conceptual schemas, following the research by Roger Schenck and Abelson and all those guys. This is, again, 50-year-old psychology. So what about the syntax? We will use constructions in the sense of Berkeley construction grammar. And the traditional concerns of syntacticians are addressed by a sparse system of linkers. So there's only two linkers, actually, agent and patient. Marci Makrai will present his views at his defense a few days from now. He and I parted ways on this. He is much more interested in capturing a great deal more of these traditional concerns of syntacticians than I am interested in. So I went toward minimalism. There's only two. I need two. I cannot do it with one, obviously, and I don't need three. So that's where this system is today. His is more elaborate. But the idea that this is linked to basically thematic roles, or sort of Fillmore-style deep cases, or Panini-style Caracas, is the same, okay? And again, I'm not really interested in sort of educating among these theories. Okay, so semi-compositionally, it is subdirect decomposition. There is the direct decomposition. This is the compositional case, and this is the subdirect product, which is the main thing about the subdirect, that is not unique. Okay, this is spelled out in a great deal more detail in chapter 2.2 of the vector semantics book, and I'm not gonna spend time on it now in the interest of time. I'd like to finish in another 10 minutes or so. Okay, so there's also a graph theoretical views where the linkers are providing the edges. There's only two, subject and object, so nominative, accusative, and it is sort of homework to do this right in ergative languages. And here's a typical example: John dared to criticize the mayor. John is the subject of daring and the subject of criticism, and the object of daring is this entire criticizing the mayor. Okay, it's not just the object is not criticized, and the object is not mayor. It's the object is criticize the mayor. Okay, so these are hypernodes. This thing down with the @ sign in the middle is a hypernode. And all hypernodes are subject verb object triples, like in the so-called resource description framework, which is widely used in knowledge representation. This is actually a standard that is blessed by the World Wide Web Consortium, and it's been around for 20 years, and there are parsers for it, and everybody can do anything with it. Okay, and the point is that you don't need hyper edges, you just need hyper nodes. Because you don't need, the reason why I'm trying to be so minimalist is about this, is about for this kind of representations things, it's essential that an edge has a beginning and an end at most. It cannot have like a third thing. So you cannot have like a subject, an object, and a second object. In one conceptual unit, you have to do stuff about that. Okay. And there is, you can see, this is the linearization in sort of SVO format. John dares something, the object, and the object is John criticizes the mayor. Okay, it's pretty simple. People learn it in about 5 minutes, and then they can produce this very well. And there is unification operating silently in the background. So this John and this John, I'm not sure whether my cursor is visible. This John and this John are the same John. Okay, they are unified in sort of graph theoretic terms. Okay, so what are these mysterious things in the background? I said conceptual schemas. Here's a conceptual schema. It has 4 parts. It has a buyer, a seller, it has some goods, and has some value. Okay, and importantly, there's characteristic properties of this. One of these is not all the slots are easy to name. So the buyer and the seller are easily named. The object that is being bought or being sold, that's not so easily named. We call it the goods. Okay, but you don't have to call it the goods. Somewhat abstract thing. It's not linked directly to things. So if you say bread of course can be bought and sold, but the idea of bread does not, it may trigger in you the idea of baking or the idea of eating or something, but rarely will it trigger the idea of buying. Everything is for sale, so nothing is for sale in that sense. Okay, however, the money, yes, the money will change hands in some kind of commercial exchange, yes. But it doesn't have to be money, and actually the legal language talks about consideration. There has to be a consideration. It has to be also, say, a thing of value. So there is some value, and by default that's money. Okay. Now we consider Genesis 25, 29, 34, which is a well-known story. Look at the story. Jacob sought pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, "Feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint." Therefore was his name called Edom. And Jacob said, "Sell me this day thy birthright." And Esau said, Behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me? And Jacob said, Swear to me this day. And he sware unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage and lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Okay, so there is this story. And the point is that this whole story makes absolutely no sense unless we interpret it in the exchange frame. Okay, you have to view this whole thing, what's taking part, this as a commercial exchange. And it's also the fact that it takes a great deal of work to link up the language with the schema. So only in verse 31, sell me thy birthright, is the schema triggered. Before that, we see some preparatory work. One of the guys makes the pottage, the other guy comes in from the field, and this is hungry. And the whole story requires sophisticated anaphor resolution. Okay? Note also that you cannot fill the frame directly. So you can say that the buyer buys something for something, and that something will be accusative in many languages, but there isn't a single sentence. You put this together piece by piece as you go along in the story. So a lot of the cues that you would naively expect to be present are not present. Actually, you really have to do a fair bit of not just anaphor resolution, but all kind of inference and conceptual work to get to this. So eventually, you say that the seller. You know these things that are in the slot, and we have some implications. So sell means that the agent causes buyer have the patient, and the buyer causes agent have the money. Okay, and in many languages, it's the dative that marks the buyer. Okay, you sell something to someone. But you need to figure out the other two slots. That the goods are the birthright and the thing of value is the bowl of lentils. Okay, so and it's important to note that the mechanism is coercive. It's not that Esau is a seller. Esau is the seller, and the Jacob buy birthright is not said outright in the story. The word buy doesn't even occur anywhere in the story, but it's a valid inference from this thing to say that Jacob bought the birthright. Okay, so summary. Aristotle had it largely right. For knowledge representation, basically the standard is a kind of thing with the genus and the differentia specifica is all you need. And you can't do full knowledge representation with this machinery. In particular, this is Gauss's law of magnetism, familiar and beloved to all. Okay, it's about the vector field B. And you cannot represent this with this machinery. You have these graphs, you have subjects, you have objects. Nothing works here. Okay, you can sort of do a very first tentative step that everybody who reads this formula knows that something is gotta equal 0. That part everybody understands. Okay, after grade school. So with the high predicate is equal, indicate that the subject of the equality is this nabla times b, and the object of it is 0. All right, but then what is this nabla? What is going on here? You have no idea, and unless you learn vector calculus, you're not even going to know. So on the plus side of this story is that you can implement the whole thing in neural networks. You need the vectors, you need the matrices, but you don't need higher tensors. And the bonus is that you get a decent learning theory. I didn't get to talk about this, but there is a decent learning theory coming with this, which means you can learn new words from all, not just from actually exposure. So maybe you learn candle by seeing a bunch of candles and then sort of abstracting away the notion that's a candle, you know, examples. But you don't learn the word betrayal the same way. Nobody tells you, okay, this was a tremendous betrayal. This was not a tremendous betrayal. That's not how, what is this? There's nothing you can point at, okay? So there's a lot of words that you learn conceptually, and there's actually a fair body of psycholinguistics literature that tells you that you learn this together with your social skills, and not at an any lower rate or later than you learn the physical objects, not at all. You learn them together at the same time, very often beginning with highly complex and abstract stuff. Okay, and the special bonus for lexicographers, that vector semantics get you a theory of homonymy versus polysemy. There's a paper now in this, that's only in Hungarian, I'm sorry. And here we end. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you very much for the talk. And so this is the moment when we open the discussion. So like anyone, if you have question or comment, just ask, step forward, or type it in the chat. That also works.
Okay, so Bani is asking.
The chat. Yeah. So like, okay.
You said that a lexeme is an associative network in itself. How such an associative network will look like? Okay, I will stop sharing this guy and I will open another window that shows you. This is what is in the appendix of the vector semantics, if the semantics books just list them, but the appendix of the vector semantics books already has this. There is a Hungarian edition in preparation, and I will just show some typical things from the English edition at this point. Give me a second. I need to control this thing sufficiently to stop the sharing, and I need to do something here. Now I can restart the sharing. If only I would know how to share. Yes. Share. Okay, so here is this book. And at the end of this book, which is, by the way, it's open source, so you can open access, you can download it without paying a hefty fee to Springer Verlag for it. And at the bottom, here are some typical, click on this one. And here is some typical small graphs, associative networks that give the definitions. This is black. What is black? Black is a graph that says its color is dark. Night has this color, and coal has this color. Okay, and is discussed further on page 64. And blade is something that cuts, has edge, is flat, and by default swords have blades. Okay, and so on and so forth. So this is these are given in a basically RDF style format with some dictionary compression tricks. I'm happy to say that that Panini already used dictionary compression tricks. The guy knew that it was the goal of science to produce the most compact possible description, and he went a long way actually doing this. And to this day, we have trouble producing something as excellent and as compact as the Astadiai. But hey. We are still writing grammars, and we still aim at sort of being compact and concise. Okay, other questions?
I have perhaps a kind of broader, like general question, like how sharp of a boundary would you draw between syntax and lexicon? Because like in the past it was very distinct. Nowadays distinction is kind of blurry, and there is like morphology in that, so like in the way you think about linguistic competence.
Okay, so first of all, there is definitely both syntactic and morphological competence, and to me, they are both sort of well captured by construction grammar kind of thing. So there are constructions, and the constructions themselves you can think of as little templates into which you fit particular things. So, Paul Kay and Chuck Fillmore have written a bunch about this, and it's very easy to formalize. You just, have the slots and actually denote the lexical category that fits into the slots. So there are fully abstract constructions like S goes to NPVP. Okay, that's fully abstract. There is no specific thing mentioned in there that has any surface thing. So at that level, that's not very different from these conceptual schemes. You see something. There is some stuff, and there is a verb, and there's some stuff afterwards, and that constitutes somehow a transitive construction for you. Okay, so you do pattern matching among these, and that part, the abstract construction, a lot of these constructions have sort of they smoothly move over from being completely frozen to being completely open. So a favorite example was to throw out the empirical baby with the theoretical bathwater. Okay, there is this fixed phrase to throw out the baby with the bathwater. This is memorized, it's learned, it's a lexical entry, if you will. But you can attach to it. What you're doing is that you say that it is the empirical result that is being thrown out. Even if you don't like the theory, you should at least respect the empirical results of this theory. Okay, so there is everything needs to that is syntax like needs to go into the lexicon. There is no question about it. We need to memorize these constructions, otherwise you cannot understand them. Okay, this as is thing you cannot compositionally derive. You remember the hutch that was for sale? As is. You cannot derive this from as or from is or any way of combining as with is. This is what it is. Okay, it means this particular thing, and this is a conventional association between form and meaning. It's a sign. Signs goes into the lexicon. Okay, signs all go into the lexicon. So there is syntax. There are a few patterns here and there that are purely syntactical, but very few. And that's why I said that they are sort of a very tiny portion of the lexicon compared to what they are in the lexicon. But like I said, maybe 1% of the lexicon is like this. That means 99% is stuff that you need to more overtly memorize. Okay, you memorize this covertly. You don't have it attached to direct lexical entries, but it's there, just like this part of semantics that I told you. That's far more, because you need to memorize the association of the form to the meaning. There's no way around that. So that takes up a bunch of space to memorize it. And the morphology is absolutely there in the lexicon. There are all these little automata in the background doing stuff. Okay, maybe doing analysis by synthesis, maybe doing just synthesis because you want to say something in a certain way, but they are there. They're part of linguistic competence. It's been evident since, Jim Burko had this WUG experience. You remember the WUGs, right? Everybody learns about the WUGs. So yes, we know that those things are also there. They are memorized. You memorize certain, dynamic patterns of putting things together. There is more detail about this in the book, but that's also in the lexicon. That's very much, morphology is very much in the lexicon, and it's a very big constitutive part. Okay, So, without saying too much about it here, I would say 10-15% of these things are, so the number of morphological rules compared to the number of phonological rules is vast. The number of syntactic rules is vast. And they are intimately intertwined with the phonological rules. So basically, I am lexicalist, even radical lexicalist, but I do this by a trick, by basically shunting everything into the lexicon. I say you cannot leave it out, therefore it's by definition part of the lexicon. So this is, that everything is in the lexicon is more like a method than a statement. The statement is this, that you need to memorize stuff that we say has syntax flavor, but that's not a lot. And you need to memorize stuff that has semantics flavor, and that is a lot. Okay, that's the statement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's like so my understanding, it's really like a lexicon heavy approach, but the lexicon is a very active, like generative component. So it's absolutely not like
Yes.
old school
conceptualization
of the lexicon.
Yes.
I see.
Yes, but it's a little bit different from like the generative lexicon, as I don't know, James Puseyovsky envisions that. So we use algebraic methods rather than sort of generative grammar to describe what's going on, and that helps a lot. Makes it a lot cleaner, a lot simpler, easier to solves a bunch of problems that the generative approach has. Algebra is your friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Other people? We have a chat question once again from Balint. So like, he has another question. Please elaborate a bit on item number 2 on your summary slide.
Okay, I'm not going to bring up this slide because this is horrendously painful for me to switch this. No, I could. Brilliant. Okay. In Zoom, this is horrendously hard. Maybe WebEx is better that way. Okay, summary. Item number 2. You can't do Gauss-Laws's law of magnetism. I am afraid you can't. You cannot do, basically, to elaborate, make it easier. You cannot do arithmetic. You cannot really do, 15 times 3 equals 45. You just cannot do this. It doesn't work well. You run out of memory. You get all kind of pain. You cannot do sort of arithmetic as this. You cannot do integer arithmetic. You cannot do floating point arithmetic. You cannot do any of this well. Okay. Actually, this constitutes a separate language that you learn, and it's a non-linguistic skill. Okay. And sort of language is so constructed that every normal individual learns it with a pretty competent fashion by age of 5. Okay. And, adult speakerhood starts at maybe 14. At least that's what people who study the subtleties of language acquisition say, that by 14, it sort of freezes, says that's where you are. Arithmetic skills, the ability to manipulate formulas, is something that only a fraction of the population learns. It's clearly, very few kids who can learn it early. They you would say they have talent for math or something, but basically it's not a normally acquired thing. And certainly this business that is involved here, to do this vector calculus, it's a very good thing. First of all, I'm not knocking it. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. You have to understand how this works. Okay, you have to understand scalar vector functions, vector functions. You have to understand what's a Hessian. You have to understand what's a derivative. You have to understand all this. You spend years mastering this subject. Years of intense schooling, okay? You cannot even explain it to a layman what it is all about, because by the time you explain this, what are these vectors? You have to explain about dimension and additivity and all kind of stuff. It takes forever, right? It's not enough to take the first calculus course. You have to take the second and the third course. So normally it is considered that it takes you like 18 months of study to get to this point. After high school, it takes another 18 months to get to this point that you understand this particular formula. Okay, by that I could not explain to you. There is this thing ELI 5. Explain like I'm 5. You cannot explain this like you're 5. If you're 5, I cannot explain this to you. You have to spend the time, acquire a certain amount of mathematical maturity, and then eventually you will understand it. And once you understand it, you're going to love it. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that the whatever is the appropriate system for storing linguistic knowledge is clearly not the appropriate system for storing mathematical knowledge. And I would say conversely, whatever is the appropriate system for storing mathematical knowledge is not the great system for storing linguistics knowledge. This has been noted very early by philosophers of language. I'm quoting Benasareff in this regard, not on this slide, but actually quoted in the book to this effect. Does this answer the question, Balint?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Oh. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I think if there are no more questions or comments from the audience, then I would like to thank András Kornai for the really interesting presentation and for the discussion as well. And thank you very much all for attending this event. That's it for the Nyelvészeti Esték for this occasion.